Two dates. Keep both of them in mind. Everything in this story unfolds within the gap between those dates, and from one simple question: what was happening during that gap? The 14th of March, 2024. Meghan uploads a black and white video to Instagram. She's gathering flowers, stirring something on the stove, surrounded by soft, natural lighting. A cursive logo appears on screen: American Riviera Orchard, the debut of her lifestyle brand: jam, honey, and the carefully curated California dream. Now move ahead to the 3rd of May, 2024. The California Attorney General declares the Archewell Foundation, the charity operated by Meghan and Harry, delinquent. The order is direct: stop soliciting donations and stop spending funds. 7 weeks apart, same household, same founders, one venture receiving nearly all the operational focus and commercial attention. The other quietly deteriorated in the background while attention was fixed elsewhere, and no one with formal authority was positioned to intervene. At the center of all this sits a growing controversy involving Prince Harry and what many consider his last genuinely charitable project, the Invictus Games. But is it truly a charity project anymore? This is precisely why nearly everyone involved in creating and establishing Invictus is no longer there. Tonight, we're not dealing with gossip, we're dealing with documents, actual paperwork. California filings. Federal tax returns containing a box that arguably should never have been checked. Charity watch letters that sat unanswered for 2 years. And a December 2025 restructuring that arrived at exactly the wrong time while revealing exactly the wrong details. As the timeline unfolds, one question keeps resurfacing. While Harry's name appeared in every headline and every scandal, who was quietly preparing an exit strategy? This is a story about governance, financial disclosures, and a pattern that becomes visible simply by looking at the dates in order. No interpretation required. The records are public. The dates are documented. All that's required is reading them chronologically and asking what they reveal. Let's begin with the board. Who exactly oversees the money at the Archewell Foundation? Where is the independent oversight? Who sits at the table to ensure assets are protected, donor funds reach their intended causes, and the line between charitable activity and commercial interests isn't blurred? Harry has to go to Birmingham this summer. He needs to generate some kind of business because at this point it's becoming embarrassing. Government funding is expected to cover roughly half the costs, but the remaining half is supposed to come from private donors and corporations. The problem is that those contributions are drying up. And many are asking the same question: why does all of this cost so much? The answer leads back to two people, Meghan and Harry. That is the board. That is the entire governance structure behind a foundation, raising millions of dollars from the public. Charity Watch, whose professional role is to evaluate nonprofit governance and financial health, addressed this directly in writing. The foundation reports only 2 board members, a structure that falls significantly short of broadly accepted nonprofit governance standards. Translated into plain English, Charity Watch is describing a governance model that fails to meet the minimum safeguards the nonprofit sector has developed through decades of experience with organizations that encountered serious problems. No independent trustee, no outside perspective, no one sitting at the table who isn't financially connected to the founders and operating within the same household. Think about what that means when an important decision arises. If one board member decided to shift the organization's focus toward launching a commercial brand for several months rather than concentrating on charitable programs, the only person able to formally object or call for a vote would be the other board member, the spouse living under the same roof. There is no independent governor able to say no on behalf of donors who contributed to support the charitable mission. Structurally, the foundation cannot overrule its founders because the founders are the foundation's entire governing body. When everything is functioning smoothly and donations continue flowing, that arrangement may appear manageable. But when financial indicators start moving in the wrong direction, a 2-person board without independent oversight stops being a minor governance issue. It becomes a major one. Meanwhile, the final remnants of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's connection to the British royal family continue to disappear, and that development is far more significant than the loss of a former residence. It is the condition that allows other problems to accumulate unchecked because no one inside the institution possesses the authority to formally say, stop. If Palace Insider is giving you context that other channels leave out, the like button is right there. It costs nothing, and it helps the channel continue growing. Now let's look directly at the 2024 figures from the filing. Money in, $2.1 million. Money out, $5.1 million. That's a deficit of approximately $3 million in a single year. And all of this occurred during the same period when the lifestyle brand was launching, selling out, and being widely celebrated as a success story. Go back even further, and the pattern looks worse. In 2021, the charity brought in $13 million. That was the goodwill year, the post-Oprah year. The moment when public sympathy toward Harry and Meghan was at its highest, and many people were eager to connect their charitable donations to something associated with them. $13 million in a single year. Then came 2022, just $2 million. Across the next 3 years combined, the organization raised roughly $9, $12 million in total, still less than the peak achieved during that single year in 2021. What makes this significant is that donor enthusiasm didn't gradually taper off the way it often does with new charities. Most organizations experience an initial surge of excitement before settling into a lower but stable level of support. That isn't what happened here. The drop from $13 million to $2 million occurred in 1 year, and the numbers never truly recovered. That's a very specific signal. The people who donated in 2021 looked at what the organization was doing in 2022 and chose not to come back. So where was the money going while substantial donations were still arriving? In 2023, Archewell raised more than $5 million. Of that amount, only around $1.3 million reached charitable causes directly. The remaining roughly $4 million was consumed by staffing expenses, consultants, operational costs, and what media analyst Brian Glicklick notably summarized as the trips the couple took to Nigeria and Colombia. Glicklick's broader assessment of the foundation's role was direct and made publicly. According to him, much of the public views it as a self-serving publicity vehicle for the couple and a platform used to support other commercial ventures. That wasn't an anonymous tabloid source. It was a named professional, offering his professional interpretation of what the financial structure appeared to accomplish. A platform for other money-making ventures. Keep that phrase in mind. Subscribe to Palace Insider and let us know in the comments. Were you following the Archewell story when these filings first surfaced? Now we move to the audit, because this is where the story shifts from merely uncomfortable into territory with potential legal significance. On its federal tax filing, the Form 990, a legal document signed under penalty of perjury, Archewell checked the box, stating that its finances were independently audited by an accountant. This isn't a vague statement of intention, it's a specific factual declaration. It certifies on a legal filing that an independent audit exists and has been completed. Charity Watch requested a copy. That's exactly what they do. In fact, it's one of the most important documents a charity can provide during a watchdog review because it independently verifies that the organization's financial claims align with what actually happened to the money. The first request was sent on the 22nd of January 2024. No response. A second request followed on the 6th of December 2024. Again, no response. Then came a third request on the 6th of January, 2026. Still no response. 3 separate written requests. 2 full years of silence from an organization that had certified on a legal filing that the audit existed. At that point, only 2 explanations remain. The first possibility is that the audit exists, is complete, and is sitting somewhere ready to be produced, yet the organization simply chose not to share it with Charity Watch despite 3 requests over 2 years. That explanation struggles under scrutiny. A charity attempting to restore donor confidence after a delinquency notice and a shrinking donor base does not withhold a clean audit capable of addressing many of the concerns being raised. Producing such a document costs very little and could restore a significant amount of credibility. Refusing to produce it over multiple requests spread across 2 years accomplishes the exact opposite. The second possibility is that the audit does not exist in the form it was certified to exist on the filing. Ultimately, Charity Watch concluded that Archewell failed to meet transparency benchmarks and was therefore unable to receive a rating. When a charity refuses to provide a document it has certified exists to the very organization responsible for reviewing such documents, it is no longer operating with a transparency gap. It is operating with a transparency strategy. And when that strategy is viewed alongside the delinquency notice, the declining donor support, and the restructuring that was still to come, it begins to tell a very specific story about the direction in which the organization was being managed. Now let's return to the delinquency notice and the date sitting immediately beside it on the timeline, because that pairing may be the most important detail in the entire story. The 3rd of May, 2024. California declares the Archewell Foundation delinquent. The official reason was a filing issue, a payment that reportedly never arrived. But state attorneys general do not typically suspend an organization's ability to operate because of a single missing envelope unless there are already concerns surrounding the broader filing history. The delinquency is the symptom. The filing history leading up to it is the underlying condition. Mark that date. Now move 7 weeks earlier. The 14th of March 2024. American Riviera Orchard launches. Picture the split screen. On one side, Meghan's Instagram account, flowers, honey jars. A carefully curated lifestyle brand she described as an extension of herself. On the other side of that split screen sat a shared charity governed by a 2-person board carrying a $3 million yearly deficit, with a state regulator only weeks away from declaring it delinquent. Same household, same stretch of time. One operation was functioning like a serious commercial enterprise, multiple product launches, coordinated marketing, products selling out within hours. The other appeared to be running on the sidelines, almost as an afterthought. The pattern visible in those dates isn't subtle, and then it happened once more. On the 15th of May, 2025, the California registration lapsed again. The latest filing the state had on record only covered the organization through the end of 2023. 2 compliance failures across 2 consecutive years. Meanwhile, the brand never missed a single scheduled launch. When the same registration experiences repeated compliance failures while the commercial side never misses a product release, it stops looking like coincidence and starts looking like evidence of where the real operational focus was directed. Now let's talk about James Holt, because the people involved matter just as much as the paperwork. Holt was there from the start. He stood at Windsor on the wedding day in May 2018, helping manage the logistics of one of the most watched ceremonial events of the decade. When Harry and Meghan chose to step away from royal life in 2020, Holt made a choice of his own. He crossed an ocean with them to California. He helped navigate the Oprah interview, the event that arguably reshaped the global conversation around the Sussexes more than anything before or since. He helped build and manage the charity throughout the years that followed, the media scrutiny, the public criticism, the endless news cycles. The staff turnover that eventually became its own recurring storyline in royal commentary. Those familiar with the operation said Holt may have been the last remaining aide who truly understood firsthand what Harry and Meghan experienced inside the palace, not because he read about it later, but because he had lived through much of it alongside them. He stayed for 7 years. Through the Oprah interview and its aftermath, through the Netflix series and its aftermath, through the memoir and its aftermath, through the staff departures, financial concerns, regulatory issues, and everything else that followed. Then, in December 2025, as staff reductions were announced, the deficit had become public, and the foundation was quietly shrinking into something smaller and less visible. James Holt packed up and returned to the United Kingdom to raise his family. There was no tell-all interview, no public statement, no detailed account of everything he had witnessed over 7 years. He simply left. And sometimes the most significant action a person can take is leaving quietly, without explanation, after the people who needed to understand the message had already reached their own conclusions. 7 years of loyalty from a man who had been there since the wedding day ended in silence at the exact moment the organization he helped build was contracting rather than growing. And he wasn't the only one. The director of programs and operations departed during the same round of cuts. The individual responsible for overseeing the charity's actual program work, earning an annual salary of $146,000, left in the same announcement that described the organization as moving into something larger. The executive director was gone as well. By various estimates, more than 20 people have passed through and exited the Sussex operation since its creation. One royal source summed up the pattern with a remark that lingered. They cycle through staff faster than most people go through toilet paper. Highly accomplished professionals, many at the top of their respective fields, believed enough in the mission to uproot their lives for it. Yet time and again, they ultimately decided they had seen enough. Then there is Dr. Sophie Shandauka at Centabale, the charity Harry co-founded in 2006 in memory of his mother, a charity that itself became engulfed in public turmoil in early 2025. Chandaka was not a tabloid source. She was the chair of the board, the person sitting at the head of the table. And her account of what she was asked to do was remarkably specific. According to her, Harry's team approached the charity and requested that it publicly defend Meghan against negative press coverage. Her response was firmly on the record. "We are not going to establish a precedent where we become an extension of the Sussex PR machine. An extension of the PR machine." Those words did not come from critics or commentators. They came from the chairwoman of Harry's own charity. Now let's turn to the December 2025 restructuring, because it serves as the final piece of evidence and, in many ways, the most revealing one. In the 19th of December, 2025, the announcement arrives. The Archewell Foundation would transition into Archewell Philanthropies. The language was optimistic and forward-looking. The couple and their children would be able to broaden their global philanthropic efforts as a family. The messaging emphasized growth, expansion, a larger vision, a new chapter. Yet during that very same week, 3 staff members were laid off, eliminating more than half of the organization's remaining workforce. The executive director, who had been there from the beginning, departed. The director of programs and operations, the person responsible for running the very programs the charity existed to support, earning $146,000 annually, was gone as well. Donations had fallen from $5.3 million to $2.1 million. The $3 million deficit remained in the filings. The audits that had been requested were still nowhere to be produced. 2 separate California compliance failures remained part of the public record. You do not expand an organization by eliminating more than half of its staff while watching donations decline by 60%. That is not expansion. That is retrenchment wrapped in the most reassuring public language available. But from a governance and regulatory standpoint, one particular detail matters more than the rest. The fiscal sponsorship model Archewell was transitioning toward generally carries fewer mandatory disclosure requirements than an independent standalone foundation. It reveals less. The financial picture available to the public becomes less detailed, less transparent, and harder to evaluate than under the structure it replaced. And this shift happened at the exact moment scrutiny was reaching its highest level. A publicly documented deficit, 3 unanswered charity watch letters spanning 2 years. A delinquency notice on the California record, a second registration lapse in 2025, and continuing questions about the overlap between charitable activities and commercial ventures. Against that backdrop, the organization reorganized into a structure that required less public disclosure. That is not the sort of move that typically reassures regulators. It is the sort of move that encourages regulators to lean closer and ask additional questions. The announcement itself framed everything through the lens of family. A family broadening its philanthropic efforts. Family is private. Family is personal. And the implication behind that framing is that family operates in a space where outsiders should not be asking questions about finances. But the funds donated to the Archewell Foundation were never family funds. They were charitable donations entrusted for specific public purposes. The people who contributed those funds are entitled to a transparent accounting of how those resources were used. The fiscal sponsorship transition does not eliminate that obligation. If anything, it obscures it by moving financial activity into a structure that reports less publicly, requires fewer disclosures, and offers a less transparent view to anyone attempting to follow where the money is going. Regulators reviewing the timeline, the delinquency notice, the missing audit, the staff departures, the shrinking donor base, and then the move into a less transparent structure are unlikely to find that sequence particularly comforting. Now step back and view the entire timeline at once. The pattern becomes difficult to miss. The 14th of March, 2024, the brand launches. The 3rd of May, 2024, the charity is declared delinquent. 2024, a $3 million deficit appears in the filings. 2025, California registration lapses for a second time. May, 2025, the brand continues without missing a launch. December 2025, the charity is reorganized into a structure that provides less transparency. Throughout that entire period, the brand continued operating according to schedule, while the charity absorbed every regulatory setback, the delinquency, the unanswered audit questions, the staff departures, the declining donor confidence. the restructuring into something smaller and less visible. Every compliance issue, every public accounting question, every governance and transparency concern. All of it remained attached to the charitable side of the operation. And through all of it, the brand kept moving forward. American Riviera Orchard became as ever. Products launched, products sold out. New product lines appeared on schedule. The social media presence remained warm, polished, aspirational, and visually disconnected from the growing stack of paperwork accumulating elsewhere within the household's broader financial picture. One of these ventures was managed like a focused commercial enterprise, with coordinated launches, disciplined execution, and the sustained attention required for commercial success. The other appeared to be managed as though governance concerns could remain quietly in the background until circumstances made that impossible. The dates contained in the public filings identify which was which without requiring anyone else's interpretation. There is also a reputational element here that extends beyond charity and into business. Reputation functions as a form of financial collateral. When the charitable side of an operation begins generating headlines about delinquent filings, absent audits, and declining donor confidence, the commercial side can no longer draw upon that reputation as effectively. In March 2026, Netflix's investment involvement with the As Ever brand came to an end. That occurred during the same period when the regulatory and financial issues surrounding the shared household were most visible to the public. Whether those two developments were directly connected is something only the people involved in those discussions can answer with certainty, but the timing exists within the timeline. And the timeline itself is part of the record. The filings are public, the dates are documented, the 3 Charity Watch letters are documented, the California delinquency notice is documented, James Holt's departure is documented, Dr. Shandaka's statements are documented, Rachel Maxwell's contract research is documented, Brian Glicklick's assessment is documented. None of this depends on anonymous palace insiders, unattributed briefings, or journalists pursuing a particular narrative. It depends on reading the documents the organizations themselves submitted to regulators and public authorities, then asking a straightforward question. What do the dates and numbers reveal when they are examined together, in sequence, rather than one at a time in isolation? The charity was declared delinquent in May 2024. The brand launched in March 2024. The registration lapsed once again in May 2025. The brand, meanwhile, never missed a launch schedule. Then came the December 2025 restructuring into a less transparent model, at precisely the moment public scrutiny was at its highest. These are dates. These are documents. They do not require elaborate interpretation to be understood. Paperwork does not have an agenda. It does not sit for interviews or make emotional television appearances. It does not hold opinions about the monarchy, California, or what anyone's future should be. It has no personal investment in any outcome. What it contains are dates, figures, filings, checked boxes, requested documents, and records showing whether those documents were ultimately produced or not. And in this case, the dates, the numbers, the unproduced documents, the certifications made on legal filings, and the records that were requested 3 separate times without being provided tell a story that is, in many ways, more revealing than anything contained in the public statements issued along the way. Not because they prove intent, not because they prove malice, but because they reveal, through the documented record itself, where the attention, resources, and serious operational focus appear to have been directed and where they were not. That is the story the timeline tells. So what stands out most to you? Is it the 2-person governance structure operating without independent oversight? Is it the audit that was certified as existing on a legal filing and then never produced despite 3 written requests? Or is it the decision to restructure into a less transparent form at the exact moment scrutiny was intensifying? Those are not rhetorical questions. Different readers will arrive at different conclusions depending on which aspect of the record they consider most important. Share your thoughts in the comments below. This is the kind of story where details matter, and more often than not, the comment section ends up bringing insights that are every bit as valuable as the reporting itself. Subscribe to Palace Insider so you don't miss the next breakdown. And if detailed document-based analysis is why you're here, hitting the like button is one of the best ways to support more of it. Until next time.